But the idea is, part of that process, some contemporary hard scientists argue, is overlooked by the importance and the effectiveness of induction, right? Not deduction, right? From induction, right? A more inductive process, right? We look at a particular instance of X, whatever X might be. We recognize that this particular instance of X is so specific, is so unique, that it stands as, and obviously Stroud situates this discourse in an analysis of Descartes, specifically where Descartes is conceptualizing a piece of paper and a fire, but I'm not going to get into that, right? You can read the book and get the contextual situatedness yourself. But the idea is, we recognize immediately from a particular instance that I can generalize, and I've really, my generalization is based on the fact that I've identified, as Stroud said, a representative case, or, so this could be representative, or more simply stated, a standard. Now, I'm not proficient enough in hard sciences to say this as a matter of fact, but I would imagine that the discovery of polio, if my K through 12 knowledge on how polio was discovered with, you know, sort of the orange and the observation of its decay and so on and so forth, we looked at that particular case, that particular instance, and recognized that we could generalize a fact of the matter from that particular instance. Right? So that the idea is, it's important to recognize the possibility of generalizing from particular instances. It's not an easy thing to do. For the hard scientists, it's not that easy. And for the social scientists, it's extremely difficult, because we're talking more about socially constructed facts, right? And we all know the distinction between sort of hard science facts and socially constructed facts. Socially constructed facts, instances of their occurrences have to be so general, and have to be so, they have to have a particular utility, and we'll talk about utility later. They have to have a particular utility such that they apply across the spectrum to multidisciplinary analysis, and it's very hard for people to think that abstractly. The point is, of the lecture series, is to try and help. I mean, this is it's free education, right? So some people like this bit, some people won't like this bit, some people will understand the relevance and the implications, some people won't. So it depends on you, right? So that's sort of where this is going. I'm going to return to this in a more mathematically complex, that was the ghetto philosophy version. I'll return to that, that same sort of demarcation in a bit. Alright, so bullet point number 2, quote, a demonstration of a particular isosceles, now here's the example to make sense of it, right? A demonstration of a particular isosceles triangle has a certain property, for example, that it can be a demonstration that all isosceles triangles have that property. Interior angles totaling 180 degrees, three-sided enclosed figure, blah, 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 blah. Right? As long as the original instance, the instance of the initial isosceles triangle, was typical or representative of the whole class. Right? So Stroud gives us a hard science example, but I want to give a social science example because the overwhelming majority of the work that I do publicly on my YouTube channel, barring the more sort of complex mathematical logic stuff that I do, is hardcore social science. Right? Not to say that I want to demarcate social science from natural sciences or social sciences from mathematical sciences, but the idea is I want to think of an example in which we can talk about the same standardization from a particular instance across a general population, if you will, that doesn't pertain to anything mathematical, though I will return and give you a more complex mathematical example in a second. Alright, so the idea is very simple, right? And I don't want to belabor the point. Insofar as we, as social scientists, are attempting to arrive at this standard, so here we are, the social scientists, and what we are attempting to conceptualize is some standard X. As case, what have you. So as standard as case. We're attempting to conceptualize the standard case. the questions that we have to ask ourselves, in all honesty, and it would be awesome, if the technology supported more collaborative discourse via the net, to have like a JD professor from some university sort of chime in on the lecture series and talk about the role of legal precedence, right? I don't particularly know, I know what legal precedence is, I don't particularly understand, because I've never read it, and I haven't really thought of it until just now, how precedence is, not necessarily defined, but how precedence is identified, right? What is it about this particular case that makes it precedence? Is it simply because it's the first of its kind, or it's never happened before? I would imagine part of it is yes, but that can't exclusively be it. I don't know the technical legal answer to that, right? What defines precedence, right? What is the definition of legal precedence? But the idea of legal precedence, irrespective of the fact that I don't know I don't know the sort of the technical legal definition of the conditions that satisfy the definition of precedence. The idea is we can still distill conceptually those functions necessary. I hope you're following along. I hope I'm not going too quick. But we can still distill those functions necessary in order for us to make sense of the functionality of a precedence, right? What is it that creates this standard, right? So the idea is that we do have to ask, what are the, and I'm going to use a Kantian phrase here, conditions for the P-O-S-S-I-B-I-L-B-I-L-I. What are the conditions for the possibility of X, right? Right? This is where good epistemology starts, right? As far as I'm concerned. Good epistemology, great epistemology, starts with that very basic question. I don't yet see this thing in the world, right? Or if I see this thing in the world, I don't yet understand the functionality, the how. I don't understand how this thing functions in the world. I know that this thing exists. However, I don't know the mechanisms, the internal dynamics, the social relationships, the complexities that allow this thing to function. I don't know how. The best way to begin, and this is just an example, and this is just a suggestion, and in no sense am I saying that this is a sufficient condition. It's necessary, though not sufficient. The best way to begin, one of the best ways to begin, is to say, what are the conditions for the possibility of X? Right? What are the necessary things that have to be satisfied in order for me to talk about X? Right? So, for example, despite the fact that I don't know legal theory, and despite the fact that I don't know what definitively identifies a case as, legally speaking, as a case of precedence with which all other cases are referenced thereafter, something to that effect, I can immediately conceptualize some of the factors that have to go into the assessment of a case as precedence, as a representative case, which is more to the point. There has to be a very unique, specific, dynamic, internal to the case, right? This case has a very unique dynamic, right? There also has to be a very rigorous standard with which assessments are made based on that unique dynamic, right? Based on this very unique dynamic, the relationship between X part, Y part, we, the legal theorist, or the judge, whoever, I mean, I guess the judges get it from the legal theorist, and it's like a bit of an interchange, but we definitively identify this relationship as leading to consequence X or Y. There's a very, very clear distinction. There's no ambiguity, right? It wouldn't make sense to have something that satisfied the condition for precedence if there was ambiguity in the act of satisfying the condition. That would undermine the idea of precedence in and of itself. So you don't even need to understand the legal theory to understand completely what must exist in order for it to function as an instance of precedence, right? There has to be a very unique aspect to the case. I don't know, I can't even give an example because I don't even know, right? Now I'm definitely more theoretical, more sort of abstract, but there has to be this sort of unique aspect to the case itself. That unique aspect also has to be generalizable. There has to be an anticipation that the occurrences and the events of a similar kind are likely to happen in the future. That's yet another example, right? and there has to be